All right, good morning and welcome back. Today we're going to do Chapter 13, Section 2. We're going to talk about the Texas Revolution. All right, Spanish Texas. This man up in the left-hand side that you're seeing here, this is Stephen Austin. The Spanish land called Tejas bordered the U.S. territory of Louisiana. Tejas was Texas. This land was lush with forests, rich soil, and grassy plains for grazing. It was home to Plains and Pueblo Native Americans, and it really was a vast, vast area that you saw a lot of different things in there. There were a lot of things in this region that, it really does engulf a very large number of different climates and landforms throughout the United States. In 1821, only about 4,000 Tejanos, which are people of Spanish heritage that considered Texas their home, lived in Texas. The Spanish wanted many more people to move to Texas to defend the land from Native Americans and from Americans. The Spanish government offered huge tracts of lands to impresarios, which would be people that came from Spain to basically colonize Texas, but they were unable to attract anyone from Spain. So Moses Austin asked for the right to settle and was given a large tract of land as long as his settlers would follow Spanish law. And this is Moses Austin. This is Stephen Austin's father. Shortly after Stephen Austin arrived in Texas in 1821, Mexico gained its independence and Texas was now part of Mexico. So basically what happens is Moses Austin, who is Stephen Austin's father, he passes away. He then passes on his hope for his dream of starting this colony to his son Stephen. Stephen didn't want to do this. Stephen wanted to be a lawyer, but he figured he should honor his father, and he did it. Stephen Austin traveled to Mexico City to ask the new Mexican government to let him start his colony. And they said, yes, that's good. So between 1821 and 1827, Austin attracted 297 families to his settlement, and they were known as the Old 300. And if you go to Texas today, some of those families are still there. Austin's success attracted more land speculators from the U.S., so by the 1830s, the population had swelled to 30,000, with Americans outnumbering the Tejanos 6-1. Well, the Americans, they start causing issues. They start feeling like they should get special treatment. They start acting up, and the Tejanos, there starts to become some issues between the Americans and the Tejanos. As more and more Americans settled in Texas, tensions rose between them and the Tejanos. Mexico outlawed slavery in 1829, and the slave owners in Texas were angry because they wanted to continue to grow cotton. But now it's illegal for them to have their slaves. The Tejanos thought that the Americans believed they were superior and deserved special privileges. The Mexican government sent an official to Texas to investigate the tensions, to investigate what was going on. The government cracked down and did not allow any more Americans to immigrate into Texas, and they made Texans pay taxes for the first time and increased the military in the area. Those officials, they go up there, they see what's going on, and they basically went back to Mexico and talked to the government and said, you know what, if you don't do something here real quick, you're looking to have a civil war to a point where it might be unrepairable there in Texas. So because they started to crack down on them, Stephen Austin, he's going to set off for Mexico City in 1833 with a petition. It was signed by Americans and Tejanos, and they wanted to become a self-governing state within Mexico. So in Mexico City, Austin met General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. This is Santa Anna. He was the Mexican president at the time. He agreed to most of the requests, but then he learned of a letter sent by Austin saying if the demands were not met, he would support breaking away from Mexico. So Austin, on his way down there, he'd written a letter. It was picked up by members of the Mexican government. It said he would support this breaking away. Santa Anna then has him jailed. So Santa Anna sent more troops to Texas and ordered them to Gonzales to take a cannon, but the army failed to take the gun, and then they were defeated at the Alamo. So basically, the Mexican army was not a great army by any chance, but they did have numbers. So he sent the army up to the city of Gonzales, where the Texans were known to have this cannon. They were unable to take the cannon. They then went to Alamo, and they were defeated at the Alamo. So basically, things are not going well for the Mexican army. So Santa Anna himself, he took 6,000 troops, and he himself heads to Texas. Now, the fight over the Alamo. On March 1st and 2nd of 1836, Texans met at Washington on the Brazos to decide what to do about Santa Anna's troops. This is Sam Houston. Sam Houston was the only man with military experience. He was placed in command of the Texas Army. Sam Houston had actually fought under Andrew Jackson, and Sam Houston was a very brave individual, but by this time he was an alcoholic. He had a lot of issues. He had been wounded several times, so he had chronic pain. He was just, but for this situation, he was the man for the job. The Texas Army barely existed. There were only two small forces. One, a company of 420 men at Goliad, led by James Fannin, and this is James Fannin right here. And the second was a company of 183 volunteers at the Alamo that was led by William Travis, and this down here in the right corner, this is William Travis. Now, the fight for the Alamo. Other famous men at the Alamo were Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett had actually at one point been a congressman in the U.S. House of Representatives. He was also a known survivalist. And then another man who was a survivalist was Jim Bowie, most known for making the Bowie knife. There was a small force of 25 Tejanos in support of the revolution, and they were led by Juan Seguin, and this is Juan Seguin. So what ends up happening, shortly before February 23rd, Juan Seguin is sent out to try to go get help because they know that this very large army is coming towards the Alamo. So he doesn't want to go, he wants to stay, but he's the only one who speaks Spanish, so he goes to try to find help. On February 23rd, 1836, Santa Anna's troops surrounded San Antonio, and the Alamo's defenders held them off for 12 days. 183 men in the Alamo, which basically they were using as a fortress, against 6,000, and in some instances between 6,000 and 12,000 Mexican soldiers. On the 13th day, they were attacked by 1,800 men, and the Texans eventually ran out of ammo. At the end of the day, only 5 Texans were still alive. Basically what happens is they have this massive charge. You hear this huge roll of gunfire. They're mowing people down, but then it just goes silent. And that silence is because they ran out of ammo. They then breach the walls, and now it's hand-to-hand combat. Well, it's 10-1. So, of course, the people in the Alamo are going to lose. They executed all of them except for 5. Susanna Dickinson was one of the survivors, and she was ordered by Santa Anna to tell the story of the Alamo to other Texans, basically saying that if you don't surrender or you don't do what we ask you to do, everybody's going to get executed. And here's the Alamo. This is, it's hard to see, but this is a picture of them breaching the wall. This is actually kind of the schematics of the place, and you can see how it was a church, basically, and you had your walled-in area, so they used it as a fort, and then this is what it looks like today, the church part of it. Anyway. Now, victory at it's Jacinto, but they say Jacinto. With Santa Anna moving through Texas, people began fleeing east, and Houston sent a message ordering the men at Goliad to retreat, but they were captured by Mexican forces and more than 300 men were executed. Houston's army doubled and was now a fighting force of 800 angry men. They're very upset because Santa Anna is showing no mercy. He's executing people who have already surrendered. So Houston knows that he can't just fight the army because, you know, he's way outmanned. So what he does is he just kind of keeps playing cat and mouse where he doesn't let them catch him, and he keeps far enough distance where he can't be hit. But he finally comes to a plan. In late April, Houston's army caught up with the Mexican army at San Jacinto. So you see this is the San Jacinto River. You can see the Mexican army, they're camped, and the Texans, they camp inside the woods so the Mexican army doesn't know that they're there. They snuck up on the Mexican army and in a matter of 18 minutes killed half the Mexican army. They did this very early in the morning when people were still sleeping. They basically came through, rushed through the camp, shooting people while they were still sleeping before they had a chance to get up, and they basically overran them. They did this in a matter of 18 minutes. They killed half the Mexican army and forced Santa Anna to sign a treaty giving Texas its freedom. He will deny that, that for the rest of his life that Texas is free, but there's nothing he can do about it. I mean, he signed the treaty. Now, they become what's called the Lone Star Republic. In September, Texas raised a flag with a single star and took the nickname the Lone Star Republic. They set up their own army and navy, and Sam Houston was elected the first president. In 1836, the Texas government asked Congress to annex Texas into the United States, but they're not going to do it right away. So Texas is actually going to be its own country for about 10 years. Because of issues over slavery and fear of war with Mexico, Texas would not be annexed for the next 10 years. They didn't want, you can't come in and have an odd number of states now with more who are slave states, and plus they don't really want to go to war with Mexico, and they know they're going to have to if they annex them in, so they don't annex them for at least 10 years. Now, that's it for Chapter 13, Section 2. You got any questions, get a hold of me. Make sure you're doing the readings and the worksheets. Have a great day.